Today we are going to discuss regarding cholinergic drugs. At this point, you have already completed cholinergic transmission and you're also aware about the cholinergic receptors, that is the muscarinic receptors and nicotinic receptors. Now, the location and the functions of these receptors are very important to understand the pharmacology of cholinergic drugs. So we are going to learn the pharmacology of cholinergic drugs mainly in terms of classification, the mechanism of action, actions, uses, and adverse drug reactions. So for that matter, any drugs that you're going to learn in the further classes, you will be mainly learning them under these subheadings, that is classification, the pharmacodynamics, that is mechanism of action and actions, then uses and adverse effects, and sometimes we'll be also referring to a little bit on the pharmacokinetics of drugs also. Okay, now the other names for cholinergic drugs are cholinomimetics or parasympathomimetics. Because they are mimicking the parasympathetic nervous system, they are called as the parasympathomimetic drugs also. Now, first we will learn about the classification. So we have got mainly two types of cholinergic drugs. One is the directly acting cholinergic drugs, or otherwise called as the cholinergic agonists, and the other ones are the indirectly acting ones, under which comes the anticholinesterases. So first we'll deal with cholinergic agonists. So cholinergic agonists are the drugs which are directly stimulating the cholinergic receptors, mainly the muscarinic receptors, and they bring about the action by directly stimulating either the muscarinic receptors M1, M2, M3, M4, M5. Okay, and under this comes the cholinesters. Examples are acetylcholine, methacholine, carbachol, betanicol. And cholinomimetic alkaloids. Examples, pilocarpine and muscarin. Under the indirectly acting cholinergic drugs, we have got anticholinesterases. So you have already learned about the cholinesterase enzyme. There are two types of cholinesterase enzyme, the true cholinesterase and the pseudocholinesterase enzyme. So the cholinesterase enzymes are the enzymes which metabolize the acetylcholine. So if there is a drug which is anticholinesterase, okay, that means that will inhibit or little inhibit the function of the cholinesterase enzyme. So what will happen is the level of acetylcholine will increase, and that increased levels of acetylcholine will act on the muscarinic and the nicotinic receptor. So here the stimulation of the receptors is indirect because there is no direct action of the drug on the receptor. In fact, the drugs here are actually inhibiting the cholinesterase enzyme, and thus the metabolism of the acetylcholine is decreasing. The level of acetylcholine is increasing, and the increased acetylcholine levels will stimulate the cholinergic receptors. So under this, we have got lots of examples. The principal anticholinesterases are neostigmine and physostigmine. We will learn about the anticholinesterases elaborately in the coming up slides. So now we will look at the directly acting cholinergic agonists one by one. Under this, first and foremost is acetylcholine, and it is considered as the prototype drug of this class, and it has got both muscarinic and nicotinic actions. So you've already learned the actions of acetylcholine in the previous class, and it is in fact a summary of all the functions of muscarinic and nicotinic receptors. Acetylcholine doesn't have any therapeutic role because it is metabolized very fast. It's only used for experimental purposes. So if you see the slide which I'm showing here, it is the function of the M1, M2, and M3, which you have already learned. And these slides are showing the functions of NM and NN. So if I want to say the actions of the acetylcholine, I can just sum up all these actions. That is, actions on M1 receptors, actions on M2 receptors, actions on M3 receptors, the actions of NM on the NM receptors, and actions on the NN receptor. This is already covered in the previous class. Or you can also write the actions of acetylcholine system wise. Like if I want to say what is the action of the acetylcholine on the heart. So we can say that it decreases the rate of impulse formation, conduction velocity, and contractility of the heart by stimulating the M2 receptors. Then I can ask you what is the function on the smooth muscles. So it causes the contraction of visceral smooth muscles through its action on the M2 receptors. What is the function or the action on the exocrine glands? So it increases the secretion from the exocrine glands by stimulating the M3 receptors. Similarly, how does the acetylcholine affect the blood pressure? So you already know that at lower doses, it causes a release of nitric oxide. The other name for nitric oxide is endothelium-derived relaxing factor from the vascular endothelium, causing vasodilatation and fall in BP. However, on higher doses, after blocking the muscarinic receptors, if you give very high doses of of acetylcholine, it will stimulate the NN receptors, and that will cause the depolarization of autonomic ganglia and the catecholamine release, causing a rise in BP. So remember that acetylcholine at low doses causes a fall in the BP because of the stimulation of the M3 receptors, and that is via the release of nitric oxide. However, if you block the muscarinic receptors and then give very high doses of acetylcholine, it will not act on the muscarinic receptors. It will be acting on the NN receptors, causing a release of catecholamines and causing a rise in BP. Catecholamines, you already know, adrenaline, noradrenaline. So this is being released, and that causes a rise in the blood pressure. Okay, so this is a summary of the acetylcholine, and the other drugs under choline esters are carbachol and betanicol. Again, they are not very popular, and carbachol is sometimes used in glaucoma, and betanicol is used for post-operative urinary retention and paralytic ileus. To overcome these problems, betanicol is used. However, all these drugs are very less popular as compared to the other drugs that you're going to learn in pharmacology. Now, let us see what are the next class, I mean drugs under the cholinergic agonists. So you have got cholinomimetic alkaloids, and the first example is pilocarpine. It is derived from the leaves of Pilocarpus microphyllus. It has mainly got muscarinic actions, and it is mainly used in the eye, mainly to produce meiosis, ciliary muscle contraction, and fall in intraocular tension. You already seen that under the muscarinic action, how the stimulation of M3 receptors can cause meiosis, ciliary muscle contraction, and fall in intraocular tension. The main uses of pilocarpine is mainly as a meiotic to counteract the actions of mydriatics. So you would have seen that people who are having spectacles and all, when you you start to use the spectacles, you have a refraction testing done. Okay, and then you put eye drops in the eye, which causes dilatation of the eye, and you have a blurred vision for some time. And that is actually a mydriatic. Now, if you want to counteract, or you want to come out of the mydriatic effect, you might have to put a meiotic in the eye, or you have to wait for the mydriatic action to just wean off. Then you have got the other use, open angle glaucoma. And other than the use in the eye, it is also sometimes used as sialagogue. Sialagogue is a drug which is used to increase salivary secretion. So you also know that M3 receptors are present in the salivary glands, and the cholinergic agonists, they always stimulate the salivary glands or the M3 receptors in the salivary glands and cause salivation. So the sialagogues are usually used in Parkinsonism condition, where usually there is a decrease in the secretions. So, in order to increase the salivary secretions in such individuals, pilocarpine can be administered. Now, when the pilocarpine is used in the eye, the usual side effects are stinging, painful spasm of accommodation. And for the root, it is usually available as a topical root in the form of drops, and you also got the Ocusert. So Ocusert is a ring-like structure, It is placed here in the lower eyelid, and you can see it slowly releases the drug into the eye. Okay, and the advantage of this OcuCert is that you don't have to put the drops every 4 or 8 hourly. Okay, if you're using a drop, then you have to put it very intermittently. But when we have put inside an OcuCert, it will just go on releasing it over some days, and once it is like the drug release is over, you can take out the OcuCert. So this is very useful in individuals who tend to forget to put the drops in the eye at the correct intervals. That is the pilocarpine OcuCert. Now, muscarine is the other cholinomimetic alkaloid, and it has got only toxicological importance. It is the active ingredient of mushroom, and it doesn't have any therapeutic use. It's only having a toxicological importance. Let's remember that if there is a mushroom poisoning, the treatment is supportive care, and antidote used is atropine. Atropine is an anticholinergic drug, which you're going to learn in the next topic. Okay, now next one are the indirectly acting cholinergic drugs, and this class is very important from the examination point of view as well as from therapeutics also. So these are called as anticholinesterases, and they increase the level of acetylcholine in the synaptic cleft by inhibiting the degradation of acetylcholine by cholinesterase enzyme. And these drugs are derivatives of either carbamic acid or phosphoric acid. Now, if you look at the classification of anticholinesterases, there are two types mainly, reversible and irreversible. The reversible is again classified into carbamates, which includes physostigmine, neostigmine, pyridostigmine, edrophonium, rivastigmine, donepezil, galantamine, and atrazine, which includes tacrin. And then the irreversible ones are classified further into organophosphates like diflose, icothiopate, malathion, diazinon, and carbamates like carbaryl and propoxyl. So, if you look at it carefully, the reversible anticholinesterases are the ones which are having therapeutic uses, whereas the irreversible ones are mainly present in the pesticides and have only got the toxicological importance. Let us look at the mechanism of action. Now, the anticholinesterases, I told you, they are the derivatives of carbamic or phosphoric acid. So they are reacting with the cholinesterase enzyme in the same way that the acetylcholine reacts. So for that, we have to understand it a little better. So this is the acetylcholine that is coming here, and this is an enzyme, okay, cholinesterase enzyme, which has got an esteratic site and an anionic site. So you can see the acetylcholine is coming and reacting with the esteratic site, and it is forming the acetylated enzyme. And this acetylated enzyme reacts extremely rapidly with water, resulting in the production of acetic acid and the free enzyme. So what happens is after the metabolism of acetylcholine is done, the enzyme becomes free very fast. However, in the case of carbamates and phosphoric acid, what happens is that they also react with the acetylcholine enzyme and carbamylate the enzyme or phosphorylate the enzyme. Okay, and this carbamylated enzyme, it reacts very slowly with water to release carbamic acid and the free enzyme. Whereas the phosphorylated enzyme reacts extremely slowly or not at all with the water to release the enzyme. So what happens that whenever the carbamylated drug is acting on the enzyme is becoming free very slowly. That is why they are causing a reversible type of inhibition of the enzyme. Okay, these anticholinesterases are causing a reversible inhibition of the enzyme. Whereas the phosphorylated ones, okay, that that enzyme is reacting very slowly or not at all with water. So it kind of causes an irreversible inhibition of the enzyme. Okay, this is how the mechanism of action of these drugs are. These are either carbamylating or phosphorylating the the cholinesterase enzyme and inhibiting it either reversibly or irreversibly. Okay, so by inhibiting the enzyme, what is happening? The it is not able to, the enzyme becomes unable to metabolize the acetylcholine. As a result, the levels of acetylcholine will increase, and that will act on the muscarinic and the nicotinic receptors, causing cholinergic actions. Okay, now what are the actions of anticholinesterases? It's the same as the cholinergic agonist only, because ultimately all these drugs are going to bring about the cholinergic actions only. Here I have just summed up the important actions. For example, in the CVS, it causes hypotension and bradycardia. Just like acetylcholine, it causes a fall in BP and decrease in the heart rate. Skeletal muscles, it is causing a force of contraction, increased force of contraction by acting on the NM receptors. In CNS, it is improving alertness and cognition. So the actions they are exactly the same as any cholinergic agonist. Now, there are two important anticholinesterase compounds which you should know. They are mainly physostigmine and neostigmine, and they are both reversible anticholinesterases. And the difference is that one is obtained from a natural source, whereas the other one, that is neostigmine, is from synthetic. When you look at the chemistry, physostigmine is tertiary amine derivative and the neostigmine is quaternary amine compound. Because of the large structure of the neostigmine, it doesn't have good oral absorption, it doesn't cross the CNS, and doesn't have penetrate the cornea. On the other hand, because the smaller structure, tertiary structure of the physostigmine, it has good oral absorption, it can cross the CNS barrier, and it can also cross the cornea. The direct action of physostigmine on the NM receptors is absent, whereas neostigmine directly acts on the NM receptors. So at this point, you have to understand that if neostigmine is acting directly on the NM receptors, its main action will be on the skeletal muscles. The important use of physostigmine is as a meiotic or in glaucoma, whereas neostigmine, because it is acting on the skeletal muscles, its main action is uses in case of myasthenia gravis. Now, let us look at the therapeutic uses of the anticholinesterases. The first use is as a meiotic, and I already told you it can be used as a meiotic in glaucoma or to counteract the effects of mydriatics after refraction testing. It can also be used to prevent the formation of adhesions between iris and cornea or to break the adhesions if they have already been formed in condition called as iridocyclitis. Then, it is also used in myasthenia gravis. Now, you know that myasthenia gravis is an autoimmune disorder characterized by weakness and fatigability of skeletal muscle. Now, what happens here is that there are autoantibodies are formed against the NM receptors on the skeletal muscle end plate. So what happens is that you know that the acetylcholine acts on the NM receptors and causes the skeletal muscle contraction. But when the NM receptors are destroyed, the acetylcholine cannot act because there are a few number of receptors available for the acetylcholine to act, and therefore there is less muscle contraction. So whenever there is less muscle contraction, the person will feel weakness and fatigability. Now we are treating this condition with anticholinesterases like neostigmine and pyridostigmine. What is the rationale of using anticholinesterases is that the anticholinesterases, they will increase acetylcholine by inhibiting the cholinesterase enzyme so that the acetylcholine levels are so high that it can act on a wide area of receptors. So you should understand that in a patient with myasthenia gravis, the number of receptors per end plate, near the end plate, will be very less. Okay, because most of it is destroyed. So the acetylcholine has to act on several or a large area to get the effect of acting on a single end plate in a normal person. Okay, so to increase the levels of acetylcholine so that it can act in a large number of receptors, we are giving anticholinesterases. The agents or the other drugs which are used for myasthenia gravis includes immunosuppressants like cyclosporin, azathioprine, corticosteroids, and also there is we also use technique called as the plasmapheresis to remove the autoantibodies, and in some cases thymectomy also is done the case of myasthenia gravis. But the principal drug therapy is anticholinesterases. So please refer the other therapies from your textbook. Now, other therapeutic uses are using this drug in post-operative paralytic ileus or urinary retention. So this is like the paralysis that is seen after a surgery. When during surgery, skeletal muscle relaxants are given so that the person doesn't move unnecessarily. So for that, that process is called as curarization. That is, you're giving skeletal muscle relaxants to relax the skeletal muscles. That process is called as curarization. So after the surgery is done, we want the muscles to reach back to its normal tone, or we don't want the muscle to be in the relaxed state. So we have to do a process called as decurarization. That is, we are removing that relaxant effect, and that is done by giving an anticholinesterase like neostigmine, because they will act on the NM receptors and cause contraction of the skeletal muscle and increase the tone. Similarly, for the same reason, there is paralytic ileus. That is, the person might be having constipation or unable to pass urine because all the skeletal muscles are relaxed. So again, you can give neostigmine to reverse paralytic ileus and urinary retention that occurs after surgery. It's also used in case of a number of poisonings like cobra bite, belladonna poisoning, and in the overdose of tricyclic antidepressants, phenothiazines, and antihistamines. So these are the poisonings or the bites where anticholinesterases can be used. Another condition where anticholinesterases are used is Alzheimer's disease. So you know that in Alzheimer's disease, what happens is that there is an overstimulation of there is a you can feel can see that there is imbalance, okay, of the cholinergic transmission, and you always have a decreased cholinergic transmission that is occurring in Alzheimer's disease. So you want to increase the cholinergic transmission. So for that, you're giving anticholinesterases, and the examples of the anticholinesterases which are given are mainly cerebroselective anticholinesterases, that is the ones that are acting in the CNS. For example, the rivastigmine, donepezil, and galantamine. Now, the adverse effects of anticholinesterases are the same as that of the cholinergic drugs. Increased salivation, increased sweating, flushing, bradycardia, bronchospasm, abdominal pain, diarrhea, increased urination. And whenever it is used in the eyes, it can cause meiosis and decrease vision in the dim light and impaired accommodation. Now, finally, we come to the very important part, that is the organophosphate poisoning. And it is one of the most common poisonings in our country, especially among the farmers, because this is the type of poisoning that is done with the help of insecticides. So I already mentioned to you that organophosphates or irreversible anticholinesterases are present in the in the insecticides and pesticides. So the farmers usually they use it as misuse it for committing suicide. So you can see that I'm giving a case history here. A 50-year-old farmer was brought to the casualty with profuse sweating, copious salivation, muscle weakness, and breathlessness. So you can see here some of the indicators are sweating, salivation. This is all indicating towards cholinergic poison. An empty bottle of insecticide was found near him. Again, it is indicative of some insecticide being used for committing suicide. On examination, you can see the pulse rate is showing bradycardia and there is a hypotension. So all this is indicating that it is a cholinergic type of poisoning. So mostly the cholinergic drug that can be in an insecticide is an anticholinesterase, irreversible anticholinesterase, mostly organophosphate. So this is a case of organophosphate poisoning. So how do you manage that? So whenever you are managing a poisoning, you have to mention general measures and then the specific measures. General measures is to terminate the further exposure to the poison, move patient to the fresh air, wash the skin and mucous membranes with soap and water. Gastric lavage is done to remove the poison from the stomach, maintain the patent airway and positive pressure respiration, give supportive measures by maintaining blood pressure, hydration, and if there are seizures occurring, you have to give diazepam. The specific antidotes that are used for organophosphate poisoning are atropine and cholinesterase reactivators. So let us first look at atropine. So atropine will counteract the muscarinic symptoms. Okay, the muscarinic symptoms are mainly salivation and the bradycardia and the hypotension. All these are muscarinic symptoms because they are done or happening through the stimulation of M3 receptors or M2 receptors. Okay, now so atropine is mainly counteracting the muscarinic symptoms. It will not reverse the muscle paralysis that is occurring because of a nicotinic action. Now you will be wondering now why nicotinic action is causing a muscle paralysis. It is supposed to be causing muscle contraction, right? So here what happens is that there is so much of the poison is acting on the nicotinic receptors so rampantly that there is repeated contraction to an extent that the receptors finally become desensitized, and that results in muscle paralysis. So all the cases of anticholinesterase poisoning, whether it is carbamate or organophosphate poisoning, must be given atropine 2 milligram intravenously, repeated every 10 minutes till dryness of mouth occurs or the mydriasis in the eye occurs. These are called the signs of atropinization. You know that any person who is having organophosphate poisoning, he'll be having excess of secretion, salivation, sweating, and all because of the cholinergic action. His eyes will be miotic because of the cholinergic action. So whenever you see that the mouth has become dry and the pupils have dilated, that means the reversal of the poisoning has happened, and that is called the signs of atropinization. Now, continued treatment at maintenance doses have to be given for 1 to 2 weeks with atropine. The next drug that has to be given is called as cholinesterase reactivators, and the drugs under this are called as the oximes. Now, we already mentioned that while atropine is taking care of the muscarinic symptoms, it is not able to reverse the paralysis of the muscles. So, for that, we have to give oximes, and these are drugs which are reactivating the cholinesterase enzyme. So, you know that the organophosphates had inhibited the cholinesterase enzyme, and now we are going to reactivate that enzyme. And I've already told you that the phosphates are phosphorylating the cholinesterase enzyme in such a way that it cannot react with water. Okay, so what we are doing is that if you put water, there is no point. It will never be freeing the enzyme. So we are giving a more reactive OH group in the form of oximes is given, and that will cause an oxonate. Okay, and that will be making the enzyme free. You can see here. Here you can see the oxime is, here phosphorylated enzyme is there, and that is reacting rapidly with oxime. And you can see that an oxime phosphonate is formed and the enzyme becomes free. Okay, so here we are using the strategy of giving a more reactive hydroxyl group than water in the form of oxime. So what are the examples of oximes? Pralidoxime, which is given intravenously, and it should be administered within 48 hours of organophosphate poisoning, because what happens is that there is some thing called aging that can occur, and that occurs to the enzyme after 48 hours. So what happens is that once aging occurs, there is no point of giving oxime. The enzyme will become resistant to hydrolysis. So whatever has to be done within 48 hours of poisoning. Okay, that finishes the class on cholinergic drugs. So you have to understand the classification, then you have to understand the muscarinic and the nicotinic actions of acetylcholine. Anticholinesterase is very, very important. It can come as a short note, in which case you have to write the classification, mechanism of action, actions, uses, adverse drug reaction, and even the difference between physostigmine and neostigmine. Can be asked a question on management of organophosphate poisoning, where you have to write the general measures and the specific measures in detail. You can also be asked about the management of myasthenia gravis, where you have to write about the anticholinesterases and other therapies that are available. That's all for the class. Thank you.